What is up, everyone? Technically Leonard here. Today I'm going to try something I like to call True Story Thursday. If you like this, show me by liking this video. And if you're not already a subscriber, please, by all means, please do so. It really helps out. Thanks in advance. Anyway, on with the story. I have been in a psychiatric hospital. I know. I'm crazy. I'll tell everyone. But yeah, in all seriousness, this happened way back in my early 20s, quite a few years ago. Give you a little bit of foundation on the story. I am visually impaired, as many of you may know, many of you may not know. And this has led to many difficulties in my life, many issues that I've had to battle, including but not limited to severe depression. Clinical depression it is categorized as. So anyway, things were particularly difficult during my teen years and early 20s because I could not drive. This made everything more difficult. This even made getting and keeping a job more difficult. And everything kind of piled up on me in my early 20s, and I became severely depressed. As in, self-harming, depressed. And yeah, so this led to me ending up in psychiatric hospitals 3 different times, actually. 3 different facilities, for that matter. And the first facility, it was very dumpy. It was not a pleasant place to be. I would describe it as a very dirty, poorly maintained kind of clinical setting. The adult unit where I was kept was a locked unit. It was a secure unit. Basically, if you've never been in such a place, it's kind of jail-like. You're not totally, in jail, but you're locked down. You're very much controlled, and you're told when you go in said facility that if you act up, if you do not cooperate with the staff, yeah, you're probably going to get a shot of something that's going to make you very compliant, very unable to resist. So yeah, you want to cooperate to get out of there as quickly as possible. Now, the facility I was in, none of the facilities were state-run facilities. They weren't the big long-term state-run facilities. They were the smaller kind of clinical facilities that people are put into for a few days, a week, maybe a few people as much as a month, but I was never in any of them more than a week. So I tried my best to get out of there. But please forgive my clock, by the way, if you hear the chime. But anyway, I was in the first facility for a week. It was a very long week, a very boring week. Give you a little rundown of how things kind of work, very briefly. For the first 24 hours, you didn't leave the locked unit. They had a cafeteria in the facility, but for the first 24 hours, you didn't leave the unit. They were evaluating you. You stayed in the unit. They brought your meals to you. You ate in a small day room in the unit. You didn't leave. You couldn't leave the unit. Now, for whatever reason, I never had my shoelaces taken or anything. I don't know what the deal with that is. I know there were some people that did. Like I said, I was in there for self-harming reasons, and they just never did. I never attempted to do anything with shoelaces or anything, but yeah, but basically, you're allowed to have nothing but your clothes in this place. We couldn't have Our wallets, we could have a little bit of money, but you didn't want to have a lot of money on you in there because you had nowhere to keep it. You could keep it in your pocket. You could, stick it under your pillow at night, which I did. But you had nowhere to keep it, so you didn't want to keep a lot of money on you in there. You could have no electronic devices. Toiletries, you had to check in and out of a supply room that where they kept everything locked up and everything. It was very controlled. It was very jail like in the way they handled things. And it was not uncommon to see police slash deputies in and out of the facility multiple times a day. So, it was not a pleasant place to be. The adult unit that I was on, we had 2 day rooms, 2 small day rooms, and in one of those, usually wasn't usable for much of the daytime hours because we had these little sessions where you would meet with the kind of head guy in the facility, the head doctor, and also your so-called counselors and stuff, and they would talk to you and the doctor on what was going on with your situation, and the doctor would ask you any questions and then go from there. Usually this took between 15 to 30 minutes per person. So for a good part of the day on weekdays, one of the day rooms was occupied with these meetings for different people. So we really had one small day room where everyone could kind of congregate during the day, except when you got to go outside for what were called smoke breaks. Many of us didn't smoke, but you could still go out. And we did. We took advantage of it. They had a small, if you will, courtyard area with a okay gazebo. And we would go out. It was just nice to smell fresh air, see the sky. We did have windows on the unit, but it got very confined in there very quickly. One long hallway, and all the rooms were kind of off of that hallway, and the rooms were very plain, very boring. We had very old hospital type beds. These beds did, by the way, have the ability to have restraints attached to them. No one in the facility I was in ever had restraints put on them on the beds that I know of, but there was the ability. But anyway, these beds were very bad. They were very old. The frames were rusty. They actually had the ability with a little crank on the end of it to kind of raise and lower the head of the bed, but mine didn't work. It was rusted that bad. It wouldn't, the crank wouldn't raise or lower it at all. Anyway, to move on with the story, I was in that facility for a week. After 24 hours, you got the ability to, at meal times, go with the rest of the group to the little small cafeteria to get your meals, and occasionally you got called out to meet with the social worker in the facility to talk with them about your situation. And the little social worker's office was just outside of the unit, so we got to go just outside the big, heavy locked wooden doors occasionally, without the rest of the group. And yeah, so I survived that. I was there for a week and got out of there. They didn't help me. They really didn't. The only thing said facility really was interested in was giving you antidepressants, anti-anxiety medicines, for some Thorazine if they felt it necessary, and other psychiatric medications and things. It was not fun. Anyway, after a week, I got out of said facility. The doctor released me. I was happy. Came home, and all was okay for a few days, and depression started mounting back up. I don't remember the duration of time until till I was put in the next facility, but it was a different facility in a small town about 30 minutes from where I live. And this facility was actually in a hospital. It was the third floor of a literal hospital, and very similar, um, somewhat larger. At least the adult unit was somewhat larger than the adult unit at the first hospital, but it was a lot cleaner, thankfully. And basically, one of the worst parts about any of these facilities, at least in my experience, the ones I've been in, there is no privacy. You get no there's no private room. You're likely sharing a room with one, two, three, possibly four other people in a very small space when you're in the room. So you want to get out of this room as much as possible when you can during the day hours. And we did. And in the second facility, like I said, it was a lot cleaner, thankfully. It was a lot more well kept. It was a lot more professional. Um, the counselors and all, they were a little better. We had group meetings, and we would sit and talk over things and over current issues and the way we were feeling and problems we were having and things. And they were a little better, but they still, the main goal, they wanted to get you on psychiatric meds, and they wanted to get you on psychiatric meds as quickly as possible. And for anyone who's ever dealt with clinical depression, psychiatric meds may help when it gets bad enough. There's a place for it, time and a place for them, but psychiatric meds don't always help. So yeah, you kind of went along, rolled with the punches, and did what had to be done to get out of there, though. So I did, and I was in that facility for about a week as well. In that facility, we did not have a cafeteria. We didn't go to the hospital cafeteria or anything. Everything was brought to the floor for us, and we ate in a little day room. Everybody kind of ate together. And it very much felt kind of like a kind of elementary school type of environment, which is kind of degrading, honestly, when you're an adult. But I don't know. I don't get how these facilities help most people. I don't think they do. Spoiler alert. I don't think they really do help many people. But like I said, you roll with the punches. You get it over with. You do what you have to do and act how you have to act to get out of there, and you quickly find that out. And thankfully, this facility, instead of having one long straight hallway, we kind of had a big square that we could walk around on that floor of the hospital. So that was the main activity. We paced around and around and around said square all day long. And occasionally we would get to go outside for what they called smoke breaks. If you didn't want to smoke, if we didn't smoke, I didn't smoke. So you didn't go in the little smokers pavilion. You kind of stood around outside in a fenced in area. Anyway, I got over that. They didn't help me either. I left said facility, went home. Sometime later, I ended up right back in another facility. This time, I was actually, it's kind of funny. At this facility, you had to be seen at the ER at the hospital because it was part of a hospital, even though it was not in the hospital. But you had to be seen at the ER and then transported by a county deputy from the ER to the facility, which was there again. It was on the hospital grounds. It just wasn't a part of, it wasn't attached to the ER. So anyway, I was transported. They put the whole restraint belt on me and everything, transported me to the little facility. That was probably the most useless of all of my commitments to facilities because I was only there for a couple days. Um, it felt like a total waste of time. They did nothing at that facility to help any of us. Essentially, we were confined to a very small area, a very small day room area during the day, and then you got to go into your room at night. I was actually given a private room at this one per se. Um, the only reason being all the other rooms were filled up. They had no other space for me, so I was kind of given the modified um, secure room in the facility. I had to keep my door open 24 hours a day. I could not close the door. I did have the ability to adjust the bed, if you consider that a luxury in this place, but they had a lot more modern beds, but it was kind of bad. Very plain, very boring place. We were at this place. We were woken up at 6 a.m. and you didn't go back into your room until 9 p.m. Very much jail-like, from what I've been told. But yeah, so I couldn't close the door. The only time I could close the door was when I went to the restroom. Thankfully, it wasn't quite that jail-like. um, we were allowed to close the door in the restrooms, though. You knew the whole facility was monitored. Um, Doors didn't lock. You weren't allowed to lock doors if they did lock, and you were told very promptly that if you did lock doors, that staff would come and unlock them and come in on you. So yeah, you just didn't lock doors. You didn't want someone walking into you, or I didn't want someone walking in on you in the restroom. So yeah, so they didn't keep me more than about like 2 days, and they pretty much said, "Yeah, we don't know how to help you." No one at that facility was getting any help. It was sad. That was the most sad experience overall. It was a lot cleaner than the first facility, but if it is at all possible, it was a lot less help than the first facility. But anyway, I got out of there. I have never been back since then, and I don't plan on going back to a psychiatric facility. It wasn't as bad as some say, some rumors are. I'm sure some facilities are worse than others. I know some facilities are worse than others. But it wasn't as bad as some stories I've heard, and it was worse than some stories I've heard. No one ever bothered me. I'm a larger guy, so I can somewhat stand my ground, and you don't have to worry about so much about weapons and places like that because you are searched. The first facility actually pretty much all but strip searched every patient. Guys had to strip down to our underwear. The first night you were in there, and they fully examined everything and kind of took notes on you in a room with just a couple staff members, and they're like walking around looking at scars you have and examining them and documenting them. And we couldn't take showers by ourselves in the first facility. The second and third facility, it really wasn't a thing. They didn't. Thankfully, we did at least get the luxury of going into the shower room by ourselves, the bathroom by ourselves, to take a shower. But at the first facility, you had to have a staff member literally unlock the shower part of the bathroom and go in there with you. And you could close the curtain, but the staff member was like right there. They were literally, I was told they had to be within arm's reach of you. So, it's a very demeaning, and I'm going to argue not a very beneficial process. But yeah, that is my story. I have been in a psychiatric hospital, and I don't like them. So anyway, what's your experience? Have any of you been treated in a psychiatric facility? And if so, do you think it was beneficial to you? Please comment down below. Until next time, technically Leonard, sorry for the long video, but it was necessary. I'm kind of rambly, but I get the story across. Until next time, True Story Thursdays, peace.